You spent 2 years and nearly 30 million taxpayer dollars and unlimited resources to prepare a nearly 450-page report, which you describe today as very thorough. Millions of Americans today maintain genuine concerns about your work, in large part because of the infamous and widely publicized bias of your investigating team members, which we now know included 14 Democrats and 0 Republicans. Campaign finance reports later showed that team, excuse me, it's my time. That team of Democrat investigators you hired donated more than $60,000 to the Hillary Clinton campaign and other Democratic candidates. Your team also included Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, which have been discussed today, and they had the lurid text messages that confirmed they openly mocked and hated Donald Trump and his supporters, and they vowed to take him out.
Most prosecutors want to make sure there's no appearance of impropriety, but in your case, you hired a bunch of people that did not like the president. Let me ask you, when did you first learn of Peter Strzok's animus toward Donald Trump?
In the summer of 2017.
You didn't know before he was hired?
I'm sorry, what did you?
You didn't know before he was hired for your team?
Know what?
Peter Strzok hated Trump.
Okay.
The president was falsely accused of conspiracy. The FBI does a 10-month investigation, and James Comey, when we deposed him a year ago, told us at that point they had nothing. You do a 22-month investigation. At the end of that 22 months, you find no conspiracy. And what's the Democrats want to do? They want to keep investigating.
My Democratic colleagues were very disappointed in your report. They were expecting you to say something along the lines of, here's why President Trump deserves to be impeached. Well, you didn't. So their strategy had to change. Now they allege that there's plenty of evidence in your report to impeach the president, but the American people just didn't read it. And this hearing today is their last best hope to build up some sort of groundswell across America to impeach President Trump.
And if somebody knows they did not conspire with anybody from Russia to affect the election, and they see the big Justice Department with people that hate that person coming after them, and then a special counsel appointed who hires dozen or more people that hate that person, and he knows he's innocent. He's not corruptly acting in order to see that justice is done. What he's doing is not obstructing justice. He is pursuing justice. And the fact that you ran it out 2 years means you perpetuated injustice.
When discussing the June 2016 Trump Tower meeting, you referenced, quote, the firm that produced the Steele reporting, unquote. The name of that firm was Fusion GPS. Is that correct?
And you're on page 103?
103, that's correct, volume 2. When you talk about the firm that produced the Steele reporting, the name of the firm that produced that was Fusion GPS. Is that correct?
Well, I'm not familiar with that.
Let me just help you. It was. It's not a trick question. Right? It was Fusion GPS.
When the special counsel's office interviewed Mifsud, did he lie to you guys too?
Can't get into that.
Did you interview Mifsud?
Can't get into that.
Is Mifsud Western intelligence or Russian intelligence?
Can't get into that.
A lot of things you can't get into. What's interesting, you can charge 13 Russians no one's ever heard of, no one's ever seen, no one's ever going to hear of them, no one's ever going to see them. You can charge them. You can charge all kinds of people who are around the president with false statements. But the guy who launches the guy who puts this whole story in motion, you can't charge him. I think that's amazing.
I'm not certain I agree with your characterizations.
Well, I'm reading from your report. Mifsud told Papadopoulos. Papadopoulos tells the diplomat tells the FBI opens the investigation July 31st, 2016, and here we are 3 years later, July of 2019, the country's been put through this, and the central figure who launches it all lies to us, and you guys don't hunt him down and interview him again, and you don't charge him with a crime.
Now, Fusion GPS produced the opposition research document widely known as the Steele dossier, and the owner of Fusion GPA was someone named Glenn Simpson. Are you familiar with?
This is outside my purview.
Okay. Glenn Simpson was never mentioned in the 448-page Mueller report, was he?
Well, as I say, it's outside my purview, and it's being handled in the department by others.
Okay, well, he was not. 448 pages, the owner of Fusion GPS that did the Steele dossier, that started all this, he's not mentioned in there. Let me move on. At the same time, Fusion GPS was working to collect opposition research on Donald Trump from foreign sources on behalf of the Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee. It also was representing a Russian-based company, Prevazon, which had been sanctioned by the U.S. government. Are you aware of that?
It's outside my purview.
Okay, thank you. One of the key players in the June 2016 Trump Tower meeting was Natalia Vizhnetska, who you described in your report as a Russian attorney who advocated for the repeal of the Magnitsky Act. Vizhnetska had been working with none other than Glenn Simpson and Fusion GPS since at least early 2014. Are you aware of that?
Outside my purview.
Thank you. But you didn't mention that or her connections to Glenn Simpson and Fusion GPS in your report at all.
The week of June 9, who did Russian lawyer Veselnitskaya meet with more frequently? The Trump campaign or Glenn Simpson, who was functionally acting as an operative for the Democratic National Committee?
Well, what I think is missing here is the fact that this is under investigation elsewhere in the Justice Department. And if I can finish, sir, and consequently it's not within my purview, Department of Justice and FBI should be responsive to questions on this particular issue.
It is absurd to suggest that a operative for the Democrats was meeting with this Russian lawyer the day before and the day after the Trump Tower meeting, and yet that's not something you referenced.
NBC News has reported the following, quote, Russian lawyer Natalia Vizhnetska says she first received the supposedly incriminating information she brought to Trump Tower describing alleged tax evasion and donation to Democrats from none other than Glenn Simpson, the Fusion GPS owner. You didn't include that in the report, and I assume you're saying that was
the matter being handled by others at the Department of Justice.
Okay.
Now, Glenn Simpson testified under oath he had dinner with Veselnitskaya the day before and the day after this meeting with the Trump team. Do you have any basis, as you sit here today, to believe that Steele was lying?
As I said before, and I'll say again, it's not my purview. Others are investigating what you
So it's not your
addressed.
purview to look into whether or not Steele's lying. It's not your purview to look into whether or not anti-Trump Russians are lying to Steele. And it's not your purview to look at whether or not Glenn Simpson was meeting with the Russians the day before and the day after you write 3,500 words about the Trump campaign meeting. So I'm wondering how these decisions are guided. I look at the Inspector General's report. I'm citing from page 404 of the Inspector General's report. It states, Page stated, Trump's not ever going to be president, right? Right. Strzok replied, no, he's not. We'll stop it. Also in the Inspector General's report, there's someone identified as attorney number 2. Attorney number 2, this is page 419, replied, hell no, and then added, Viva La Resistance. Attorney number 2 in the Inspector General's report and Strzok both worked on your team, didn't they?
Pardon me? Can you ask?
They both worked on your team, didn't they?
I know. I heard Strzok. Who else were you talking about?
Attorney number 2 identified in the Inspector General's report.
Okay. And the question was?
Did he work for you? The guy who said Viva La Resistance.
Peter Strzok worked for me for a period of time. Yes.
When did you become aware that the unverified Steele dossier was included in the FISA application to spy on Carter Page?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
When did you become aware that the unverified Steele dossier was included in the FISA application to spy on Carter Page?
I'm not going to speak to that.
Your team interviewed Christopher Steele, is that correct?
Not going to get into that.
You can't tell this committee as to whether or not you interviewed Christopher Steele in a 22-month investigation with 18 lawyers.
As I said at the outset, that is one of the investigations that is being handled by others in the Department of Justice.
Yeah, but you're here testifying about this investigation today, and I am asking you directly, did any members of your team or did you interview Christopher Steele in the course of your investigation?
And I am not going to answer that question, sir.
You had 2 years to investigate. Not once did you consider it worthy to investigate how an unverified document that was paid for by a political opponent was used to obtain a warrant to spy on the opposition political campaign. Did you do any investigation in that whatsoever?
I do not accept your characterization of what occurred.
What would be your
I'm not going to speak any more to it.
InfoWars presents The David Knight Show. The Alex Jones Show and The War Room with Owen Troyer. Infowars.com/show.